University Museums would like to welcome you to our two-part tour of Drake Hall. Drake Hall is located in Centerville, Iowa, and the homeowners, Kyle and Gerhard, were more than generous to open up their door for us to tour.
Welcome to Drake Hall, Centerville.
The reason that we chose this facility to tour was that it is similarly in the arts and crafts style, and this couple is truly doing an amazing job at renovating and restoring and bringing back the glamour that is of the arts and crafts movement. You'll see a lot of parallels to our collection at University Museums and some of the exhibition objects that are currently part of the exhibition at the Farmhouse Museum. We'd like to thank our donors to the Farmhouse Museum, namely Carol Pletcher, and some of our object lenders, Lori Olk, Chris Conklin, and Lynette Pullman and John Pullman. The Arts and Crafts exhibition at the Farmhouse Museum will run through the end of October 2022. University Museums is composed of the Bernier Art Museum, the Christian Peterson Art Museum, the Art on Campus collection of public art that is scattered across campus, and the Anderson Sculpture Garden around Morrill Hall. Finally, the last component is the Farmhouse Museum, Iowa State's oldest building on campus, built in 1860, but depicts the time period of 1860 to 1910.
Come on in. This is the vestibule, and you can see the classical elements of the ceiling, and it is copper leaf. You can see the little squares at the top. And we plan to restore this back to its original cream lacquer on the walls. And the Italian craftsman that did the stonework outside did the mosaic floor. Well, as you notice on the bevel crystal glass on the doors, you see the linden leaf motif in a very arts and crafts stylized. It creates welcoming and a symbol of prosperity.
I'm Kyle Shiroma. I'm born in Hawaii, born and raised. Been in San Diego for 20 years and then moved to Orlando for 5 years, and now we're here in southern Iowa, Centerville.
My name is Gerhard von Spillmann, and I was born in Peru. And I grew up East Coast, New Jersey, and studied at the University of Florida. I studied architecture and building construction. And when I went to school, preservation was just starting to kick off. It had, just beginning to having a following. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's where my love for architecture came. And I also was big on reading the classics when I was young. So we met in San Diego, and it seems that we had the same affinity of being able to sense that little spark of somebody that is a craftsman, or what we call now a maker, that puts into an object, and it's a little bit of the best of them. And we can sense that. And since ever then, we've become what is called kind of collectors. But it's not really collectors, it's more appreciators. Since D.C. Bradley was a banker, and
Cora was a
socialite who was big on women's rights and community charity, this would have been the reception hall. This is where their guests would have first come in and taken in what was then considered and advertised in the newspaper articles as a very modern house.
Mm-hmm. It's like an open floor plan without the total openness of it. But during the Victorian era, each room was very compartmentalized, almost like a maze. So this was considered their open floor plan of the time, which is very shockingly modern for the era of 1909.
And yet it kept certain rooms, such as the library, with the crystal glass doors, and the dining room.
We found it actually in an antique mall in Nashville as we were looking for properties after we had sold our Orlando home, and we saw these matching pair of cloisonné vases, and I think they're made in China. We didn't know where we were going to live, but we knew that we liked them. So we were like, where are these going to go? And lo and behold, they fit here in this reception hall, perfectly in scale, in color, adds a nice pop of energy to the space, and we get a lot of compliments on it.
And even if the chairs are English Chippendale by nature, you can see the Asian inspired design. And if you look at the architecture of the house itself, it has the cloud lift arch, which is very Asian, which is echoed in the Chippendale chairs themselves. And when we found the pictures of the original house, it was basically the setup. So, like I said before, the house was speaking to us. We wanted to go back to. Cora Bradley, who was the first owner of the house with D.C. Bradley, and she and her daughter Bettina, who died in 1918 in the Spanish flu pandemic, were known for their gardens. They had a greenhouse and a rose garden, so they always had fresh flowers. So we're trying to maintain the same. And one of the things that we're planning is an extensive heirloom rose garden. There's some David Austins in there on the south side of the house. Well, we were living in San Diego, and when we met, he introduced me to the love to the arts and crafts movement. I was more of a classicist. So we'd go around looking at the older homes in San Diego and the preservation movement that was going on there. And we visited many houses together. We decided to help him fulfill this life dream, and we bought the LA Pottery Show rights, which is a lot of the arts and crafts and American pottery movement. And we've expanded it to arts and antiques. And when we lived in Orlando and we saw that it was becoming more urbanized and a lot of properties were being demolished, we tried Nashville, same issue, a lot of historic properties being demolished. And we decided, hey, let's just become stewards of a really good piece of architecture. But of course, we had a limited budget, so we were drooling over $2 and $3 million homes, but that wasn't realistic. And we tried to purchase a house in Vevey, Indiana, a beautiful American Empire / Italianate / Second Empire. But Cat Van D, the tattoo artist, beat us out in cash deal. So then we went to another house, and we were going to bid on the DePaul Mansion in New Albany, north of Louisville. And that didn't pan out. So then we decided to try Western Pennsylvania, because we wanted a rural area that was close enough to a larger city, but not too close to get that urban, sprawl. I wouldn't call it urban sprawl. I would call it the fast buck sprawl. Take something large, historically significant, and put 20, soulless little boxes on it. So that didn't work out, and this house kept popping up. It just kept popping up on Zillow, and it kept popping, and Kyle said, well, it's Iowa. I'm told they're not going to be very welcoming to us. And I said, no, let's go see the house. And then Serendipity came in. It was owned by a foundation. Allison Fraser is the head of the Morgan Klein Foundation, and he and his partner did a lot of restorations on the East Coast and here in town. And we learned that he was from X-Line, grew up poor, went to New York, made his money, and instead of saying, I've left this place behind, he came back to refurbish and remodel properties. And he did this one in the late 90s. Serendipity came in, and Kyle says, I don't want to stay at motels anymore. There's this historic hotel in town, the Continental, and let's stay there. We arrived late. The door was locked. They let us in. They were so nice. It was a great room. And the next morning we woke up, we came in down late, breakfast was over. No, we'll make you a sandwich. And while we were sitting there, the lady that manages the hotel comes down because somebody said that we were here to look at this house. And she started asking us questions. What is your intention? I said, well, I think our plan is to restore, not remodel, to make certain areas suited for the electricity for appliances and stuff, but we're not here to put our stamp on it, you know, our personality. So we're here for a match. Little did we know she was the head of the foundation. And, you know, so we passed our interview. And as she wrote to me yesterday, they were looking for somebody to take it over that was going to honor it, put a little bit of their spark into it. And that would free up the foundation to be doing grants and more in the community, as in revitalizing around the square, etc. And that was the money that Morgan Klein had left behind. So it was like a perfect match. And the previous property we looked at needed a new roof. This had a new roof. So it became like a plus. And then we came up to the house. And architecturally, the proportions are so good, you don't realize how big it is till you come up. And we started looking at the details since the front. And like I told them when we saw it, it's very Anglo-Japanese. The influences of both the prairie style, and it was a mix of the Japanese aesthetic that drove the aesthetic movement and was becoming popular at the exhibition of the Louisiana Purchase 100 Years in St. Louis. And I said, Kyle, you know, if you and I had a baby, this kind of would be it, wouldn't it? You know? And I said, hey, I promised you a little bungalow. This works, it's, you know, and he fell in love with it, right?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
You know, and there was, you know, he felt an affinity to it, and we bought it, and we've never regretted it. And it seems that everything that we owned was like, the house was buying through us, because even while we were, that year after we sold the house, that were 7 months that we were basically homeless, we were still buying things that we didn't know where would they go. And they just fit perfectly in here. Here in the dining room, you see the linden leaves motif on the doors, which say welcome. And this is a place of prosperity to whomever comes here. But you also see a stylized cross on the side transepts. And that comes from the biblical quote of Jesus, I am the vine, you are the branches. And the word is the fruit. So not only were they progressive, but they were also very religious people. And because of that religious aspect, they believed in charity, in hospitality, and generosity. And that's what these all symbolize.
Yeah, this cross is like in the...
But subtle, not,
Yeah, it's not like
not
that
in your
over the
face. Yep.
religion.
Yep.
Very, very subtle. Again, art and crafts, subtlety.
Now the chandeliers here in the main hall and in the living room, including the wall sconces, are from 1938, and they're an addition of olive. They took out the original combination fixtures of gas and electricity.
Oh.
Yeah, they had that combination fully electric in 1909. And to consider that this was basically a farmhouse. You know? If you look at this grand hallway here, it goes, both the Japanese and the classical found symmetry as important and balance. The columns here to the living room and to the ingle nook show that a progression to help your eye move across, and it actually makes these spaces act as one, as does the molding work, which is a bit like being inside a Japanese temple or a Japanese house. And that's going to be the inspiration not only of many of the items that we have, but of the Bradbury wallpaper that we've decided to choose in their Jeffrey's aesthetic movement pattern, which is very based on the Asian. So the concept that we want to have in here is almost like walking into a Japanese tea house, where the silk panels are on the lower level, and from the top you can see the exterior. So we're going to have the willow pattern all along the top here and in the living room. the wall, Jeffrey's infill will be down at the bottom of the, and we're going to choose a jasper background. And the willow will also be the only wallpaper in the nook, ingle nook, and in the hallway, so that it feels like you're stepping outside.
And to connect this a little bit to the farmhouse, we are undertaking a wallpaper project in the next 2 years. We've already done the main levels and up this first floor. We've used Bradley as well, and so our field paper is very similar, just slightly different colors, but more towards the William Morris style as opposed to the Japanese influence.
Bradbury has a lovely William Morris collection.
Yep, and they are an opportunity for us to have wallpaper beyond the 1976 Williamsburg Historic Wallpapers of America book. There's a lot more opportunity as restorers of historic spaces to be more historically accurate. Let's go into the dining room.
Well, this is where the family would have their main meals, and they would also have more intimate guests that were not just a social, but a family. This room was done in oak, and the specification said that it had to be stained, varnished, and then hand pumice down for a soft sheen so that it would match the dining room furniture that they were bringing over. Again, it has built-ins, the cross and vine motif that
On the china cabinet.
on the china cabinet. One of the things that we had before my collection is my Imari china, which is very Anglo-Japanese. And it's from various suppliers, from some Davenport, some Ainsley, and some Royal Crown Derby. And the serving pieces are from 1870s, and the other ones are as young as 1920s.
So this collection is Dolton and Company before it became Royal Dolton out of England, and it's in the style of aesthetic movement, which is when Japan opened up to the West in the mid-1800s. All things Japanese became all the rage, and so it affected basically art and design in every corner of the world, basically. And this is an example of the Anglo-Japanese style, which is very much the basis of the aesthetic movement, the precursor to the arts and crafts movement. And the key design element is the asymmetry of it, which Western art is very symmetrical, Japanese art is very asymmetrical, which was a revolution in design at the time. And these date to approximately 1880s, 1890s. In my aesthetic movement group, one of the group members was so appreciative that I started the group and that I contribute to it and help them to learn and appreciate that he found a set of these dishes, 5 dishes the other day. And he messaged me and saying, I love what you're doing with the group and I'm so excited and I found these that I think would be perfect for you. And so he offered to buy them and send them to me. So they're on their way right now.
We bought this table locally. It's from around the same period of the house, and it's the craftsmanship that was found in Cedar Rapids at the turn of the last century. So we bought that locally, and it came with 4 chairs that we have in the living room. Well, they're all in the Chinoiswari style of Chippendale. The chairs are reproduction. So is the table, but just the carving that was done in Cedar Rapids in the Iowa furniture industry was amazing. And those, that jardiniere, Jules Cayette, it's in very Art Nouveau style, but as you later see the glaze, that's vivid, even it's a precursor to Gruby and the American Fiance. So later on, you're going to see the fireplace. So that kind of echoes it. And we bought that in the LA Pottery Show from one of our vendors, Rick Pettiford. And those are the first batch of roses from our future rose garden. Well, the stained glass, the quality of the glass, we think it's rather exceptional. But
I think the maker was Kokomo.
Kokomo.
out of, I think, Indiana.
Yeah.
That's Kokomo glass. Unmistakable. The way the trees have that yellow and the green, that's a very characteristic style of Kokomo glass.
All those plates are Royal Dalton's Spanish ware.
And they date to approximately 1880, 1890.
Talk to me about the picture in the corner.
The old Royal. Yeah, from
1880s, 1890s, and there's a matching one on the other side as well. And these are German beer steins.
and they're allegorical. So the original fabric, on the wall it's fabric, but originally it was a complementary tapestry that was more like a wooden scene.
Was that redone with the restoration?
Yeah, I don't know.
Some people say, and some people say it could have been olive in 1939. Because the craftsmanship and the way they did the nailing instead of the gluing on
the number
borders is probably from that period.
Yeah. And that's a Tiffany Studios Cypriot blown glass lamp. And it's dating about to 1920.
Yeah, now all these grills were designed by the architect and handmade specifically. And
I think they're hand forged.
right, and all the radiators have their original gold paint. And we were told by a historian that came through that those radiators were to impress with the gold paint. They were like the Cadillacs as radiators, and they wanted people to impress. And one of the important things is you don't see radiators in front of the windows. They have radiators in the basement against the floor.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Smart.
Yeah.
Well, this library, both DC and Cora and their daughter were university graduates, so they had a love for learning, and this room is a little bit more neoclassical, as you can see in the cornice, but also the medallions in the cornice have the Japanese influence, like the chrysanthemums. And that's the original colorway in the cornice, that's the original paint. And we were wondering why the fireplace was also cream. And then when we saw the specs, all this that's painted in Morgan Mauve is really white lacquer underneath to match the cornice.
So we think it was supposed to be like a Greek temple of learning kind of feel to
Knowledge.
it. Exactly. The lamps are reproduction Tiffany Studios. They're iconic wisteria, pony wisteria pattern. This lamp on this desk here is actually a genuine Tiffany Studios, and this is the Zodiac desk pattern with blown glass, and they call it a Damascene shade, and that dates to approximately 1915, around there. And next to it is a Lalique hood ornament from about the 1930s.
And it's called Damascene because it's a lot of the type of glass that was found in archaeological sites in Damascus.
That's by Evan Chambers, and he's a glass artist out of Pasadena, California.
But working in the Tiffany style.
He does.
He does the most
Thoughtfully, yeah.
He does the most amazing iridescent glass, like blown glass. He is the closest to real Tiffany Studios glass than any other manufacturer I've ever seen in recent years. He's a genius at glass.
Not only am I trained in architecture, but I love hands-on. You know, my dad was a project manager for World Trade Center Pan Am building, and when I told him I was going to go into architecture, and he came out of his coma, he said that, I needed to have hands-on experience. I needed to build the things, do the woodwork, so that I could do a detail in things that were buildable. And I discovered that I liked putting my, going to somebody's house, like a neighbor's, and remodeling their house because they felt my energy in it. They said I put love into it, and they haven't changed things. I was very good to try to understand what the client needed, not what I wanted to do. So this house became almost like calling us because it wants something from us. And I can say that we had a very eclectic style. We concur on certain things and not on other things, and we also really like mid-century modern. And I also understand that if you mix times and periods, each period time goes from an organic to a very rigid, geometric, back to another organic. So it doesn't matter whether it's mid-century modern or, Art Deco versus Art Nouveau versus Streamline. It seems that it's always the same curve through all the periods, so that you can mix them as long as they have the same ideology. And that's what this house does. It gives you a surprise every day. It appreciates what you do, and most of all, the people here appreciate it. It was just a simple thing as changing everything to LEDs. And keeping it lit up at night, that they say, I wake up, I go to bed with the window open, and it's, it becomes something that we can look at and enjoy. So
we get a lot of comments about how sparkly it looks from the outside when you drive by with all of the beveled glass and all of the LEDs. It just really sparkles as you're moving. It sparkles as you're moving past it, and people comment on that all the time on social media.
And we had a gentleman that had done the gardens before we moved in, and he came over and he was like, well, what are you going to do with the gardens? I said, keep them the way they are. You did a beautiful job. So we're not here to take down this tree or alter this, except for that handicap ramp you'll see later. That's, and that's the thing, to somehow bring it back to 1909, but also honor the people that were through here, because in 1939, when Cora was widowed and she passed away, their cousin took the house, and she was a strong woman. She was a bank president. She traveled the world by herself, and she added the chandeliers, and she added some 1938 touches. So we're going to keep those because that's part of the fabric of the house, and we'll work around that. We understand that we're not going to be putting in this great ultra-modern or Tuscan kitchen. It has to be somewhere between refined and simple, because it wasn't something...
More of a utilitarian.
Was utilitarian back then. So it's all those things that come to us from the blessing that we are not going gung-ho on the whole thing. We're communicating with the house. It's kind of telling us what it wants to restore. And one of the major pluses of this is Wetherell's 56 pages of original typewritten specs are here with the house and the plans. So we can see what was the color in each room, what was the materials, and that's what we're trying to, follow.
Was having that information a catalyst for the purchase, or was it truly just the home itself?
It was the home. It was the home, and I think the way that we were welcomed at the hotel, and they were so enthusiastic, and the people have been appreciative, embracing, and we haven't had any what I would call, that must be nice type thing, no, why do you need such a big house for two people? And so none of that. They were like, we want somebody to really take care of it, and I guess they laughed at me in the beginning a little bit, but then they kind of appreciated that I was doing the whole 1.25 acres with a push mower. So it and they asked me, why are you doing that? I said, I want to learn the lay of the land. So we know that a great architect built this house for a person that was D.C. Bradley, who was a great benefactor for the town back then. It was then a nursing home. Well, we can edit that out. A nursing home. It was. It went through many commercial type institutional, as many great houses did during the 50s, 60s, up to the end of the 70s. And again, back to Morgan Klein. He purchased it. He restored it. And then he passed it on. And the house that the condition that it's in, the way it's been respected, also said a lot about the people of the town. You know, that they appreciate their history. Centerville has always been a very diverse community. Once upon a time, there were 36 languages spoken in this town. So that this house is to them their shared heritage. It's something that brought all these cultures and people from different communities, and it helps solidify them. And good architecture can do that. It can give somebody a sense of history and belonging.
So this section here of the living room is what was known as the music salon, and apparently there was a piano. Looking at an old 1921 photo, there was a piano in that corner, and this side here there was a xylophone. So this little area is just specifically for a music salon. Most of this is rookwood out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And most of them date to the late 1800s, and some are very early 1900s, 1903. That's Tiffany Studios, Vestibule, blown glass at the bottom there. And there's some other English makers at the top there, a French piece at the top right. But most of these with the flowers are by rookwood. And the artist is Albert Valentine, one of the top and one of the earliest artists at Rookwood. And this collection is mostly French, a lot of the, again, European/Asian style. I think it's Sargamine is the brand. And on the bottom, I think it's a German one on the bottom, Villeroy and Boch. And there's some picajour style, which they enamel between cells of metal that's soldered together. So this lamp, it was made as a jardiniere, and it dates to about the 1880s. I think it's 1882, very early, rookwood, with, I believe it's an apple blossom. And then when I bought it, there was a hole at the bottom somebody had drilled at some point in the past to make a lamp base out of it. So I went ahead and I had this hammered copper and mica lamp made out of it. A craftsman who was located in, I think, Olympia, Washington, Craftsman Studios, to make this lamp out of this jardiniere that I had.
Which is very much seen in arts and crafts.
Very much arts and crafts. The hammered copper, the mica shade, very arts and crafts, craftsman style.
You have a matching
The
shade over
sticky
here.
style. And I had him, so this lamp base was actually produced as a lamp base, and that was, let's see who did that one. That was done by Thomas Gotham, and it dates to about 1918, 1920, around there, on the West Coast, and he specialized in crystalline glazes. And that I found at a flea market. I think it was in Long Beach, California. And I think the guy knew what he had, but he didn't know the value of it. So I paid pennies on the dollar for it, what it can go at auction. And that was made as a lamp base because at the bottom there was a cork. And I took the cork out and it was glazed on the inside of the hole. So I knew that it was produced as a lamp base, or that it could be used as a lamp base versus somebody drilling it at some point. So I had that same craftsman in Washington make this hammered copper and mica lamp for it. So most of this in this case is by Dalton & Company, again, the Spanish ware line, which dates to approximately the 1880s. England, and a part of the aesthetic movement, which has a lot of the Japanese design aspects, the asymmetry, the focus on florals and birds, very much aesthetic movement. And this is a reproduction of a Tiffany Studios style lamp. And that table has a beautiful arts and crafts motif of poppies. I believe it's California poppies. Very much a part of the craftsman style of the arts and crafts movement. Okay, these are chairs are in the Queen Anne style. And the jardiniere on the lower level of this tea table, that's by a German company, WMF. And that dates to about the early 1900s. in the Art Nouveau style, the Vienna Secessionist style. So looking through, when we moved in, I thought it was probably by Rookwood or a similar maker of the time, the early 1900s. And then we found the original specifications document from 1908 in the basement, and it's in the description it says Gruby or similar for the tiles for the fireplace. So we thought, oh, it's a Gruby faience out of Boston. And it's a very collectible arts and crafts era maker for ceramics. And even more so than Rookwood, because their output was less than Rookwood's output, so it makes it a lot more rare as a collector to find something like this. And we weren't completely sure as to the maker until there was a post in the Arts and Crafts Movement group on Facebook, and a fellow collector had posted these two of these vine tiles that he had framed, and he said they're my Gruby tiles, and that really clinched the identification. So I approached David Rago of, frequently seen on the Antiques Roadshow, and he said he thought it was Rookwood as well. So it kind of threw off, even the most seasoned collectors weren't really sure of the maker until that fellow collector posted that post just a few months ago. And it was verified that it is Gruby faience. And so given the prices of each tile, we kind of priced it out at what you could sell it for. If we put this at auction as a whole, it would bring about $90,000 to $100,000 or more, because it is so rare, it is in such great condition, and it's all one whole piece, a set. So this Victrola is an orthophonic model, and it was a little later in the production of Victrolas, which were really popular in the early 1900s. And so this model dates to about 1925, when radio was starting to become popular. So the popularity of record players were kind of waning. So this was an attempt to capture, with its great sound, the people who were more into radios at the time, to try and get them back to record players. And the way you control the volume is you open up these cabinet doors, and that increases the volume. Very high tech for the time.
We bought it in Nashville, not even having a place yet. And it turned out, when we found the magazine of country living from 1921, in the living room there was that similar Victrola in that corner. So I think the house wanted it.
As you notice throughout the video, there are similar objects to objects that are on exhibition currently at the Farmhouse Museum. This includes the beautiful pottery collection of Rookwood pottery, Weller pottery, Fulper, and Van Briggle. You'll see examples throughout the exhibition of these different types of potteries. They're mainly Midwestern potteries. Also, you'll see examples of lighting in the Tiffany style, including the Tiffany light right next to me, which is a new acquisition to the permanent collection and resides here at the Farmhouse Museum. You'll see furnishings, you'll see decor, and you'll also experience what life was like in the time period of the arts and crafts movement. Specifically, the arts and crafts movement at Drake Hall focuses on Japanese or Anglo-Japanese influence, while the farmhouse is more of a rural, Iowa-focused arts and crafts installation. So preservation at a historic home and historic house museum is always paramount. The Farmhouse Museum is on the National Historic Registry, and so it is a definite concern for us to make sure that it is preserved for the future. Kyle and Gerhard also have a passion for preservation. And so some of the projects that they have worked on, like selecting wallpapers, refinishing floors, and making sure windows and doorways are up to standard, up to code, but also in keeping with historic moments and historic time periods. We also do that at the Farmhouse Museum. You'll see that we have gone through and redone wallpaper, and that's a continuing process. We've got processes for the future that include roof work, painting. It's an ongoing affair, keeping a National Historic Place in its best shape. One major difference to note is that the homeowners in Centerville at Drake Hall actually live within the space. But does anyone live here at the farmhouse? No, just the museum staff and interns that come through on the daily basis to make sure that the farmhouse is open for the best experience for you to enjoy. I hope you enjoyed this first half of the presentation for Drake Hall. Please join us for the second half soon. You'll find more information on our website, www.museums.iastate.edu. There's also other program options throughout the run of this exhibition. Thank you.